Ani, bonjour. Morning, everyone. Morning. That was a long session this morning, so coffee is going to only do so much, so I'm going to help you out here. I've been asked to come and speak today, and I chose an area that I think needs to be talked about, and a different way of managing your projects, different way of managing your assets, and moving forward in a new way with your housing development, your housing portfolio. And it was a great session this morning, learning about the new developments, with this entity, the First Nation housing community, and really tackling an issue that's very challenging. It's been challenging for a long time for our communities. Our partners, our funders from ISC and Cmhc talked a bit this morning about the work that they do, and the money that's been invested, and a lot more so in the last 4 or 5 years than prior. But we all know that's just a drop in the bucket. We heard about the $50 million in new investments, the $100 million in new investments. My home community of Wikwemikong, it's a large First Nation on Manitoulin Island. We have a housing backlog of reaching 1,000 units to meet our overcrowding needs, to meet our housing needs, to allow our members to return home. So when you look at 1,000 units, we're talking from one community owned, we're probably looking at a $250 million, $250 million we need today. And we're never going to get there. But we need to look at new ways of expediting growth in our communities and finding new ways to bring forward business cases back to not only Canada, but Ontario and the other provinces as well, as this is a national issue. So I wanted to talk a little bit about property management, maintaining your existing stock, and looking at ways to expand that as well. So Severio did a quick introduction. He didn't say Wikwemikong very well. He said Wiki, and we call it Wikwemikong. And I'm from Wikwemikong. I'm Odawa, from the Odawa tribe. We're based on Manitoulin Island, or Nidonasing is the Ojibwe for Manitoulin Island. And that's down in the middle of Lake Huron. I'm an accountant by trade. I'm not a property manager. Received my accounting designation way back, when was it? 1990. But I worked in various entities as band manager for my home community. I served as chief, as band counselor. I grew up in a business family. My father in 1966 started a family business that's called Andy's. And we have a large retail operation in Wikwemikong, and I'm a partner there as well. Spent some time with the Union of Ontario Indians. 10 years ago, I relocated my young family. I remarried just before that and moved to North Bay and worked with the Union of Ontario Indians for 5 years. But the last 5 years, I've been concentrating on advisory services, working with clients. And also, we created a new company to look at biomass power generation for remote communities to displace diesel. But I want to talk a little bit about housing today. One of my staff members, one of my associates, is the lead housing specialist. Her name is Linda Ishkokigan. She has over 30 years experience in housing, from housing construction, housing administration, and property management. And I was introduced through Severio and the Matawa Tribal Council 2 years ago to go up and work with some of the Derek service communities on looking at their housing administration and looking at ways to improve things. So Linda went up and visited 6 of those communities over the last 2 years. She can't be here today, so I've been asked to come and fill in the presentation. So if you have any detailed technical questions, Severio is here to help. I'll do my best, but Linda's a specialist. I just really want a what is property management? And what has Cmhc shared with information over the years with their partners, their clients? Talked a little bit about my home community story. I talked about our 1,000 unit backlog. We have 1,000 houses in our community, half of which are CMHC Section 95 units. Talk a little bit about property management. Then start a little bit, talk about the tools, all kinds of tools out there. How do you bring it all together in order to manage your assets, short-term and long-term? A little bit discussion on new approaches to project planning. What kind of supports are out there for housing staff? And then a closing. Just a second here. Property management. What is it? Property management is the operation, control, maintenance, and oversight of real estate and physical property. Management and owners require assets to be cared for and monitored, with accountability for attention its useful life and condition considered. I was putting this presentation together and I said, well, what is property management? So I Googled it and Wikipedia came up with this. So basically it's managing your assets. How do you manage your assets? How do you ensure they're cared for? How do you ensure they're maintained? But how do you pay for them too? Much of the funding programs we have is minimal capital housing from ISC, but everything's really pushing towards CMHC programming. So I break down property management into two areas, financial management and facility management. And we'll touch on these a bit more, but on financial management, we're looking at, if you have a rental housing program, you're looking at rent or occupancy charge collections, subsidy receipts, making sure governments subsidize you as they agree to in those agreements. We're all aware of government with breaking agreements. Make sure your loan payments are made on time. Vendor and operating cost payments, financial statements, and reporting. But the list goes on and on and on. Physical inspections. You have to ensure your assets are inspected and maintained. You can't wait for things to break or else the costs just exponentiate. Maintenance and repairs, major repairs and renovations, custodial, ground support, the list goes on and on and on. So I want to just take a step back now and talk a little bit about what our funding partners have shared with us. So I'm going to ask our maestro over there to switch over to another PowerPoint. Is anybody from CMHC in attendance here? Good. Who has CMHC housing in their communities? A lot. Has CMHC provided you with the required support and training in order to manage your assets? No? No hands go up. Okay, so my community is no different. Anybody from ISC here? Indigenous Services Canada. Okay, I'll behave on ISC best I can. I called an associate of mine at CMHC and I said, can you send me some information, that training you do with First Nations on property management? I said, I'm going to this conference. I want to, not talk in different direction than the training that you've provided. They said, sure. Then I received this, and my conclusion came when I seen this, and by everybody's nodding about the supports that you get, it's there. So CMHC, when they talk about roles and responsibility, they always say, oh, we signed this operating agreement, you got to follow it. There's terms and conditions. You have to set aside a replacement reserve. Well, if you're a First Nation citizen, you don't want to replace your reserve. You got your land base, it's small enough as it is, why would you want to replace it, is the first thing. Well, replacement reserve is a set of funds you set aside for future capital replacement, so I don't like the term there, but that's just my opinion. You have to do audited financial statements, project management, minimum revenue contribution, operating reserve surplus, CMH subsidy. And they said, there, this is your training. And so it talks a little about replacement reserves. I'm not going to go through this, so we're not here to learn about this. We're learning about how do we move beyond this and be more efficient in our property management. So they talk about replacement reserve, maintenance versus replacement reserve, long-term versus short-term. Give you examples about budgets, Audited financial statements. You have to have your audited financial statements done by March 31st. You have 60 or 90 days thereafter, or else your subsidy is going to get cut off. And format acceptable to Cmhc. Project management, there's an expectation that the First Nation employees and management practices in the operation of its projects, which include maintaining accurate books and records, maintaining appropriate levels of fire insurance, making loan payments on time, maintaining the project in a satisfactory state of repair. All fine and dandy, but a lot of detail. How do you do this? Books and records, what are your books and records? How do you maintain them accurately? There's a lot of stuff there you have to know. Tenant files, housing plans, applications, arrears letters, recurring, the list goes on and on and on. Project files, you got to keep your current operating agreement. Copy of the ministerial guarantee has to be readily available. When they come and inspect, you have to show these. Audit reviews, layouts, client inspection reports, management, related correspondence. The list goes on and grows and grows. Minimum revenue contributions, Section 95 operating agreement, operating reserve. If you have surpluses, you have to set aside an operating reserve, and then if you want to touch it, you have to get their approval. So the administration gets on and on and on. Controlling maintenance costs. How do you control maintenance costs? I like this slide. You got to do annual inspections. You got to have preventative maintenance practices. You know, your furnace, your HRV, service agreements, recaulking of windows. It's great that they're saying this, but how do you put it into practice? Say no to cosmetic items. Painting living room a different color. Well, really good training here. Controlling maintenance cost, tracking your maintenance budget, and then they go through some pictures and fixed and variable costs. Then they teach you on Section 95 operating budgets, preparing your budget, audit reviews, and then we'll go back to the other presentation. So this is the training they provide. Anybody see this presentation before? You've seen it, but does it mean a lot to you? Well, if you work in it on a day-to-day basis, yeah, you can get the gist of it, get the understanding of it. But if you're a one-person housing staff or a two-person housing staff, or because we don't get money to hire staff, right, in our First Nations, so it gets very challenging. So what I wanted to just quickly, before I get into talking about some of the opportunities for improving your property management, I just want to give you a quick overview of the Wikwemikong story. We're a large First Nation based on the Nodawnsing, which is Manitoulin Island in the middle of Lake Huron. We have a registered population of 8,326. We have about 3,500 living in our First Nation, so about 35–40%. Many live off reserve for employment reasons, education reasons, but a big part is overcrowding, lack of housing. Like I mentioned, we have about 1,000 houses on a backlog, so people just can't live there. We heard about overcrowding, and so our people move and live elsewhere. Our housing stock is about 1,200. 325 was built over the years using band capital housing, and if you know band capital housing, you know, through the minor capital program, going back into the 70s, 80s, 90s, and probably even later, you know, you're allowed to use 26,888 to build a house out of your minor capital. Well, can't build much with 26,888, so you get started. You know, you add some wage programs, employment programs, using untrained labor, and you try to build a house. And then the condition of the houses are there, but we have about 325 that were built over the last 30–40 years. 40 band rentals. We use some of the money that we received to create a band rental program, so it's a revolving program. 18 rent-to-owns. But the big one that we had is 499 Cmhc units. That's basically the only program that was available to help expedite our backlog over the last, 20–30 years. Private homeowners, people who've been able to build their own homes, start from scratch, slowly building them up. until now, financing was almost impossible on First Nation lands without some form of guarantee. But through the new programs, First Nation Market Housing Fund, it's starting to get there. So we do have a lot of homeowners who've taken on their own initiative. We started with Cmhc back in the 1970s. We built a personal care home. I think it was about a 30, 40 bed personal care home. We also built some teacherages, and they also had the Section 10 loan fund where the band could apply for a loan to build housing and pay it back. So there was some use there, not a lot back in the 70s. But in the early 1990s, we really started looking at how can CMHC help us. The band capital, the INAC capital program was just not doing it. So we started in 1995 with a 12-unit project, and we built 6 single-family dwellings, and we decided to do a 6-plex, little row housing. We are now into our 40th project, and we're hitting almost 500 units, and we'll hit 500 this coming year. It's been a success, better housing, more housing, but a lot of growing pains as well. And we share what we learn. So how do we get there? And it started with we developed a detailed needs assessment and a housing inventory back in 1994. And we updated it regularly. It started with our demographics, what our population was at the current time, how has it been growing, a lot of young families, single parents, single people, a lot with overcrowding. Our elders were also needed some accommodation support as well. So we did that in detailed needs assessment, and we did a bunch of bar graphs, pie charts, and we really seen that, okay, it's great that we want to build 3 or 4 bedroom units where maybe 30%, 40% of our backlog was families, but we really need to target the single people, the single parents, the elders. So that's when we started getting into the multiple units, the 6-plexes and so on. Priority list, combination of single family dwellings and multiple units. Backlog is still 700 plus today. Had a chat with my housing director this morning. She said, no, that number is closer to 1,000 based on work that they've done this past fall. We started looking at our construction management. How can we build houses differently? How can we build them better? How can we build more with less dollars? So our leadership at the time made a commitment back in the 1990s. We're going to target 100% local labor and trades. It took a little while to get there. The trades were sort of a little harder to catch up because of the training and the licensing that was required, but today we're here. New construction techniques and local design. Most of our construction is through ICF foundation and exterior walls. There's a better R value. There's a tighter building envelope, which leads to lower maintenance. Targeting multiple units. About 15 years ago, we built a 30-plex because our small families are single people, and we could build more per unit, more houses, less per unit. So that was a target. But there's growing pains, having a lot of single people living in one area, and but we manage those as best we can. A lot of 10-plexes we built. Most of our new housing that's going up, it's either side-by-sides or semis or 3-plexes because we can build more for less dollars. New technologies we've been trying, in-floor heating systems, more advanced HVAC systems because of the building envelopes. We need good air circulation, get rid of the mold problem. Now we're looking into getting rid of fuel oil heating. So we developed the wood pellet exchange program that was heavily subsidized this past year. We want to grow that. Wood pellet stoves and furnaces. Even some of our commercial buildings, our school and our 30-plex got wood pellet boiler systems in there. Solar panels, adapt into solar panels because of the high cost of electricity, even though we're on Manitoulin Island. Before about 3 years ago, we had the high delivery charge, and homeowners were not able to make ends meet. You all seen this in many of your communities. You got hydro bills, electricity bills in the middle of winter, about $1,200 to $1,400 a month, when small families are on social assistance, and their only shelter allowance is about $500 or $600, $700, $800 a month. They just can't make ends meet. So a lot of these steel roofing, steel siding, just ways of trying to maintain the housing stock. So a lot of work started, but a lot of work to continue. So property management in Oquimacong, because we have 500 Cmhc units that we built, over the last 20, 30 years, Oquimacong has been able to really move forward with their property management. Back in 1994, we had one housing director, one housing assistant, and a construction manager, and they started building. Well, we quickly learned through CMHC operating agreements that we had to do property management and do all of this reporting and things. We hired an additional staff there, and they started growing. Today, we separated, have a whole new property management office. Their main job is to work with the 500 units and those families and make sure that our properties are maintained. Financially, we're in pretty good shape, but it was a lot of growing pains. We have 8 full-time staff. A lot of them in administration, but we also have 2 or 3 full-time maintenance guys out maintaining those units. So the big part is tenant relations, doing application, doing intakes with interested families, rental agreements, rent collection, arrears, work orders for maintenance, financial assistance, office administration. Then we have our maintenance staff. When there's a problem, when there's something that breaks, who do they call? They call the band office. Well, they call our administration here, and they prepare work orders, and they send out the maintenance guys to go do the work. Like I said, we have 3 guys. 2 of my friends I grew up with, that's their full-time job now, is to do maintenance, and they love their work. They love interrelating with the homeowners, solving problems. Sometimes it's late nights, though. They have on-call. Their stuff happens 24/7. Regular maintenance. There's regular maintenance, changing filters, going in and inspecting, moving out and move out. There's a lot of tenants that come and go. When they leave, a lot of work has to be done in these units to get them back up to a level where somebody would be happy to move into. Custodial multi-unit buildings. We have a 30-plex, a number of 10-plexes. There's custodial on some of the common areas, so these maintenance guys look after that. Grounds crew. We hire summer students, and they do a lot of grounds maintenance. People want to live in a nice place with a nice property, and that's instilled in the work of our staff. The administration. There's a couple of key administrators there. In financial management, somebody has to track the occupancy charges payments, the rent payments. Are they being paid? Are they being paid on time? Because how our administration is set up, we have a separate central finance unit at the band office, and this housing property management office is a separate building. There has to be regular communication there. Are the payments coming in? If not, somebody has to chase them. Majority of our clients, the elders and so on, they're on some form of assistance. So those offices pay their occupancy charges directly. So there's a lot of information back and forth. Tracking operation and maintenance costs. So the relationship with the other departments here, with the finance department, with Ontario Works, who pay an occupancy charge directly, where the homeowners are not involved with responsible for doing that. Housing construction for major maintenance items. So there's a lot of information going back and forth. So you need a tracking system or a management system required there, and I'll talk about that shortly. Reporting to funding agency. CMHC expects us to do our annual financial statements and do annual reporting. So if we have 40 different operating agreements, you can only imagine the reporting that is required there. And so it gets very tedious. There's software that's being used. They have it's called the Aboriginal Information System, I believe, that the housing department uses for tracking and integrates with the band's ACPAC system. It helps, but it's not the perfect scenario. They should be developing their own, and that's something that they're going to be working on. So there's a lot of information sharing going back and forth. Excel spreadsheets, databases, files. It's very, very demanding, and without the proper tracking or training, we learn, set up our own systems. But that's one area we've been fortunate, is that we've been at it for a long time, and we've grown to a level where we can hire staff to do this. Majority of First Nations just getting into CMHC, you just don't have that capacity, that support needed, and you're left to fend for yourselves. So I said earlier that we like to share what we learn, best practices, worst practices, and you'll have my contact information coming up there, and I'm available anytime. I'm going to be part of this housing community here to share some of our experiences, because, you know, that last session we attended this morning about the overcrowdedness, you know, we all got to work together to try put a dent in that. So tools for effective property management. What do we do? How do you, as a small community just getting into CMHC, how do you address your situation? We heard that the supports from CMHC probably not there at the level where you should be. You sign an operating agreement and you're asked to run with it. Tribal councils are there to provide those supports. They're stretched at capacity as well to do on-the-ground support as well. They're doing the best they can. So what solutions are there that the First Nation needs to do? My only advice to you is every First Nation is different. Every First Nation has different introductions to CMHC, to rental housing program, to property management. Every First Nation will have different requirements. You either have some full-time staff or staff that have to share duties to do these things. So every First Nation is different. So my first advice is establish a specific, for your First Nation, property management structure that meets your First Nation needs. There's off-the-shelf solutions, software. You can learn from bigger communities, but you need to develop your own systems. It's hard when I'm explaining and how to do it, but if you start there and look at what do you need to do in order to meet your requirements for your funders, to make sure that the bills are paid, make sure that the housing payments are made, make sure that your annual financial statements are done, make sure you have a relationship with your administration, your chief and council. You need to set up your own structure. And I can't explain it better than that, other than set up your own system that meets your needs given your various circumstances. And it all starts with a well-defined housing policy and rental management regime. Has to be community developed for your specific community and approved. And it's a large process, and unfortunately, when we walk down this path of getting into CMHC and doing what's needed, we don't, unfortunately, plan more than just to make sure that we get that CMHC approval, we get that ministerial guarantee approval, we get that loan approval, and we hire people to do the construction. What happens after we have to start maintaining it? So we have to take that extra step. And I'll say it again, develop something that's specific for your First Nation. Every First Nation will have different capacity levels, different staffing who are targeted with maintaining and managing it, but develop something specific, then you design your system around that. It's all about the system that you develop, and it's all about the staff. Some communities will be further on with CMHC than others. Others are just starting. So you really have to take that snapshot. What do we need to offer? What are the requirements in running our program? And how do we meet those requirements? And what systems, what solutions do we pursue in order to do that? So looking at the organizational structure. Well, if you have one housing director and that's it, theoretically, that's just not the organizational structure, because the housing director is going to need support, you know, from a chief and council portfolio, a committee, your band administrator, your band manager, your finance staff, they all become part of this new system. Yeah, you have to track your finances, but you have to run your program as well. So you have to set up that own little organizational structure, set up your staffing and relations amongst your diverse departments. But a big key area is your terms of reference, which outlines roles and responsibilities. So once you develop those, set up your flow charts of information and working relationship, then you start training within that. I wish I could do a better job of explaining it than I am, but I guess my point is you have to develop your own system. And CMHC, ISC should be available to help you do that. But unfortunately, they don't offer those services if you don't know what you're asking for as well. So there's got to be somewhere in between to put this together. And that's where advisors such as myself and others can help out. Because of all the information that's needed that flows and to store it and to follow, software is available. You know, you have your accounting software, you have your project management software, which we can term AIS, or there's housing information management systems that Abenaki Associates use. All these tools are there to help you, but they have to be reconfigured or redesigned to meet your existing needs. Yes, you'll have your accounting system that your band finance, either ACPAC or simply accounting. Excel is a very powerful tool for tracking your database systems, but your underground filing systems too have to be workable. We talked earlier in the initial presentation with CMHC once of all your records you have to keep, you know, your operating agreements, your tenant files, your maintenance records, your inspections. You can imagine the filing system that your housing department needs to operate, and add alone what you have to maintain within your current First Nation administration. So records and file management is key. How do you store files? How do you gain access to them? And in the current age now, everything is going digital, your digital storage. So every work order you do, every document you do, you can scan or you can store them digitally. But there's now software that you can utilize, OCRS, optical resolution, ORS, where you can search from stuff you previously scanned and digitalized. My own community, we went to a digitalization project 3 years ago where all of our historical records, all we can find that was in boxes and storage, and our band office must be, 8 to 10,000 square feet on one level. Half the basement is all storage. Imagine all those old boxes that we had. Imagine sending somebody down there to go look for something. And we always had one lady in our office who knew where everything was. She was set to retire. I said, what's going to happen when she retires? Well, let's scan. So we scanned every document and we brought it back. We got rid of stuff that maybe we shouldn't have for 7-year storage or whatever. But now every piece of information is scanned digitally, and we can search it. So you can pull up your laptop and you can search CMHC 26-unit operating agreement. And then within seconds, if we scan it, you'll have it available at your fingertips. Then you can cut and paste from that as well. So all of this digitalization and records management, file management is here, and it can be used, and you should be using it, because what you're being asked to do under these operating agreements is basically unmanageable unless you have those tools available. Training and development of your staff and your committee. Challenge CMHC, challenge ISC, challenge your tribal councils. We need help. We need some training to do this. Hire external advisors if you can. When I was thinking about this and looking at funding and financing, when you're putting together your initial or your follow-up CMHC capital application, the consultant who's normally helping you do it, they put right in their consulting fee for his or her, because it's hard to put these together. But is there a reason why you can't put up another training and development budget item there that you can pay through the upfront capitalization and financing? so that training that CMHC maybe is not able to provide, but can be provided by advisors to design your own system, because the First Nations don't have these funds readily available. So there's another funding tool that you can do, and if you ask CMHC, I'm sure they wouldn't turn this down. That if you can get your housing administration fully trained and all these systems set up front, everybody's better off in the long run. So that's just one area that I thought I would throw in there. Ongoing development and enhancements. These conferences, and this one, it's growing. And through the community process that's being established, should include training and development, not only on new construction or new project development or project financing, but on administration as well. How can First Nations benefit by learning more in these training sessions? I'm just touching on the top here and letting you know that, our thoughts on how you can do it to develop your own specific property management structure and systems. And when you have advisors and your funders coming to train you and your staff, there has to be ongoing training and development. Staff come and go, unfortunately. Leadership come and go, unfortunately. So you need to have that structure in place to continue on with the ongoing training and implementation. These tools are all there. They're available, you can find them. But my main messaging here is you gotta develop a system that works for your community. CMHC could help if asked, but it has to take that one step further, and by buying a software off the shelf and getting training in that, probably not going to do the job. You have to have your own systems and structures set up and carry forward with there. Looking at new projects moving forward, it's challenging planning for projects, not having capacity to do so, not knowing if funds are going to be there. We heard there was announcements of $50 million, this year. I imagine the applications were 100 times that. So how did your community do your proper planning in order to give yourself a chance to access these funds when they become available? So my advice there is it has to be full community support and led. Any new directions, you have to plan how your community is going to jump on board. If you have to look at new housing programs, paying rent, paying occupancy charges, doing new ways, you have to plan it. It has to be community led. But what we did in our community that seemed to be successful in moving forward is that detailed needs assessment. Take a look at what your community needs are for new housing, for upgrading of your existing housing stock. Look at your demographics, where your population is, where it's going. Can you maybe look at building multiple units? Or now we're hearing tiny houses. Can we look at all of that and start looking at a 5 and 10-year strategy? And when you have that needs assessment, when you have your strategy done, and when the government comes and says, we have this money, bang, we want to be at first on the list. So do all of that homework now. Look at different construction methods. My community is fortunate, based on the location, that our cost of material isn't too bad. We use a lot of concrete construction. We have availability. Remote communities don't have that. So your needs assessment and your new construction methods are going to have to be tailored there. Opportunities for multiple units to be maybe manufactured elsewhere and transported in. I know that doesn't help with your labor requirements in your community to have band members employed, so you have to weigh all of those. So look at your individual requirements to develop your own strategy based on the needs assessment. I have a bullet here called Innovative Project Financing for Energy Retrofits, Energy Upgrades and Retrofits. Majority of the housing is not up to par, not up to code. A lot of electrical systems that need to be upgraded, a lot of heating systems that need to be upgraded, a lot of building envelopes that need to be upgraded. So how do you finance that? Well, if you have an existing Cmhc program and you have that replacement reserve, maybe you can tap in and work with Cmhc in partnership to develop a new program specifically to upgrade your existing infrastructure to meet its current and future needs. So don't only look at ISC fundings or Cmhc new construction. Look at all those opportunities within your different operating agreements, because that opportunity is there. Our wood stove exchange program in Wukumikong, our 30-unit apartment building, we upgraded the heating system because it was fuel oil fueled burner, so we changed it to wood chips. I mean, not wood chips, but wood pellets. It was cheaper, it's cleaner, and we were able to secure a little bit of money through our replacement reserve. It wasn't easy. We had to battle, we had to lobby, but we got her done. So when you're looking at other upgrades, maybe solar or whatever, there could be some opportunities there. So don't be afraid to think out of the box or find different advisors who can help you think out of the box. But a big area here is consultation and reporting back to the community is a must. When you start with your initial project planning, get them involved, keep consulting with them. When you have your needs assessment and your strategic planning done, bring it back to them, because they're the ones who are going to have to live with these different processes moving forward. And when your leadership get that direction from the community, send your leadership off and go out and secure the required supports out there. A lot of new approaches to project planning. What time are we at, Mr. Maestro? 23 to 12? I'm going to have a hard time to stretch this out to 12:50. We'll have a long Q&A afterwards, I guess. I traveled here to share some of the experiences that my community has and my firm has, and so I thought I'll throw in one slide as to maybe some services that we can help with. I shared earlier that my community has learned a lot over the last 30 years in property management. And we have some really good staff, some young staff who've been there, coming out of school, and they learned a lot. But they're also really sharing people who can share. So if you have any specific questions, something that needs addressing, I'm sure they'll help out on day-to-day activities and that. And they have all the tools that are needed, and they're learning as they go along. So as Indigenous people, we share. But my firm, we can take an extra step and provide some advisory services to your leadership, your housing committees, your staff, with the tools necessary. I mentioned that initial setup of your specific property management system. It's not easy. Cmhc can help with some overarching training, but you really need somebody in there that can be on the ground to help and develop that. And that's something that we provide. That housing needs assessment is critical. How do you move forward? How do you do it? Like, how do you start researching that information? And the best person I can recommend is Linda Schkockingen. She couldn't be here today, but she's done it for our community going back into the early 1990s, and she updates it on an annual basis. And she's been visiting some of the northern communities here over the last couple of years. And she's a whiz at this. She has an experience in construction management, experience in project management, project development, and she's really easy and great to get along with, and she loves visiting the northern communities. She's the best one. I would recommend her over anybody, anywhere. Establishing an effective property management system to better manage your housing assets over the long term. That's what we talk about, setting up that system, your specific system that your community needs. There's tools available, you know, accounting software, there's property management software, there's databases, and to set up those tools, to train your staff, to run it, is so critical. But it's not only your one housing director or your support staff. Various parties of your administration have to be involved too and understand that, so that those work charts, workflow, roles and responsibilities, it's important. And once Chief and Council approves that operation of the system, then that's part of everybody's job. So that's so critical. Implementation and training. Once we have it, it's hard to get used to. So ongoing supports are definitely needed. And it's like I said, it's not easy. You know, I wish it was easy for me to come and say these are the tools you'll need. Well, the tools are there. They just have to be developed specifically for your community needs. Doing some research on available property management software. I talked to my own community. They've been using this AIS system. It's mainly financial management and sharing information back and forth with the First Nations backpack accounting system. They use databases that they created with Microsoft to do some managing and tracking. But when trying to find the right property management software to bring it all together, especially to manage your assets, to ensure that your assets are there for the long term and you minimize your operating costs, that's an area that we want to focus on moving forward. Cmhc for listening. My contact information is here. I was late for my flight last night, so I ran out of my home office without bringing my card. So this is the best I can do right now. If you have any questions, I am going to be participating with the community and registering. So I want to be here in the long term as well to support with helping address this crisis that each of our communities are in. I'm free to take any questions that you may have. We have a lot of time left. Yes, sir. Good to see you again.
Igwach, Shantijar, Robert, Ndonji, Pace Plaid now. Growing up in Pickmobert, and that a lot of my family members, they worked in construction most of their lives. There's no journey persons. It's the same thing in Pace Plaid, same thing in many of our communities. There's none. And I'm noticing that there's a huge disconnect. And I was talking with some of our partners, and I'm like, well, why aren't we combining the housing projects with some of the training projects? And why aren't we doing the training projects right in community? This way those students are doing the paperwork first before the actual construction works. And then this way the students are actually getting real apprenticeship opportunities for these projects. They're building these projects right in the community, and they're going to be journey persons later on. We need to take that type of approach. That's just a thought. And I know my organization, we were asked to, if we could do that. So now we have a mobile training classroom where we could go directly to communities. We were also asked to provide construction training, residential framing and carpentry. Because with us, there is no grade 12 requirement. It's just grade 10 for an apprenticeship. You know, we need to be looking outside the box and having that real dialogue with our training providers, our band administrators, our industry partners, as well as our ISET holders. Cmhc.
You're absolutely right that it has to be a coordinated efforts. Unfortunately, with the funding programs available, for new construction and maintenance, it's been very piecemeal. So for a First Nation to look after developing the required programs in order to expedite trades development and so on, it's a challenge. Smaller communities, more of a challenge. Bigger communities, like my own community, we've been able to work through much of those challenges. And like I mentioned, 100% local labor and trades. That wasn't easy. I was a young guy coming out of school in 1980s and 1990s when I became band administrator, and we wanted to build housing on an expedited basis, and Chief and Council said 100% local labor. So we had to find ways of doing that. And our housing program became a catalyst for economic development for our community. We started building 10, 20, even a couple of years, 30 units a year. And a lot of those guys, construction workers, they've been employed for the last 10, 20 years. A lot of my friends I grew up with, they're involved in that industry, and it continues on. But our housing program had to adapt to changing times, new construction methods, trying to stretch that dollar as much as we could. So we had a couple of really good leaders. My associate Linda Schkalken, she's been there from the start, and she has a contract now to carry on some of the work. But we had a housing inspector that then became a housing designer and started designing our own designs and building them using this new construction methods. And it's been, I believe, a big success story. But that's as a big community moving forward. Smaller community, there's some challenges, so there has to be some regional work there, through the tribal councils or neighboring communities to start building that model. And I think through conferences such as this, with support from the two key government partners across Canada, ISC and Cmhc, and to draw in even provincial partners, that's where this conference has to push us to find ways of getting more resources available, not only financial resources to build, but technical resources that can really lead to long-term sustainability and long-term results. And I'm hoping that the federal government carries on with some of the investment we've seen over the last number of years. But that push has to come from the community level, our chiefs, our regional entities such as NAN and Chiefs of Ontario and AFN, because that financial capacity is not there, nor will it be unless there's some transformational change from both provincial and federal government. So a lot of that work has to, and that's why this conference is so important to help lead that. And I think the messaging still has to continue. Appreciate that. Another question here?
Bonjour. My name is Clifford Tabishkizik. I'm the housing manager for the Whiteside First Nation.
Hi, Clifford.
How are you? Just like you, I've had a vast experience in my community and watching it develop throughout the years since its early years. I have a lot of questions, just like everybody else here, and I just don't know where to begin. But the first question I had in terms of property management, under what management regime is your First Nation under? Is it under band control, or is it under some sort of authority, or do you have a housing corporation in which you manage your housing department in?
We have it's called the Wikwemkong Housing Authority. It's not a separate legal entity, but it's treated as a separate legal entity by Chief and Council to carry on with the activities as directed by the community. So it's been that way since the 1990s. So it is not a separate legal regime, but to us it's our own separate. We did not need to incorporate. Our governance mandated and set up this entity to do it. So we call it a separate legal entity, separate entity.
Yeah. And my final question is, In our particular community, we have approximately 60 to 80% unemployment rate. And one of the biggest housing priorities is trying to accommodate our single and youth in our community. And the one thing we're experiencing in our community is that although we made an honest effort in building single units, and I just recently became the housing manager in our community, and shockingly, we're experiencing that although we're addressing the housing needs of our young, single people, homeless people, we're also now recognizing that they're experiencing a financial problem. They can barely make ends meet after paying their rent, their hydro, their food. They have next to nothing to live on in the next little while. So from that experience, I'm sure you've experienced that in your community. How did you address that issue in dealing with the homelessness with the youth in your community, in terms of from a financial perspective?
Good question. Right in our housing policies, our property management policies, a lot of the units that were constructed over time, the occupancy charges included your occupancy plus your utilities. I think it's called a hot rent. So there was a rent that was calculated in order to do that. And the number that was generated had to be below the shelter allowances that individuals were eligible for under social assistance. If it wasn't, we wouldn't do it. So there was a lot of work done there. A lot precipitated on as to trying to build the most efficient housing unit, where you try to control your utilities, your heating system. You can't really control electricity. People use it as is. There were some problems, going back 5-10 years ago with the increases in the electricity cost because of distribution, delivery charges. But since those are gone now, that financial crunch has come down a bit, but will the Ford government overturn that? Something we got to wait and plan for. So there had to be a lot of planning, part of the business case development, the needs assessment on how do we manage that. And we've seen some struggles with costs going out of line. We've seen some struggles with maintenance costs and so on. And it is a growing pain, but it's something you just have to plan for and manage. So those hot rents are one area. The risk is on the community, on the administration to keep all your other operating costs down. But it is a combination of both. I think the big thing is the efficiency of the housing construction to keep your heating costs down as much as possible. Was a big plus for us, but it is really a challenge. And I open up to carry on those discussions with you, offline here as best we could. Okay. You're welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Scott Isbolin.
Hi, Scott.
I've been a housing manager for Long Lake 58 now it's my 7th year, and tough job. You guys all know that. Everybody knows that. I think I noticed you talked about committees. I know in our First Nation we have committee, and I believe that it's very important because to me it's community members being involved as well, whether it be tenants or community members in home. But I mean, that's why we chose to have committee members, because I think that's important to have. Also, I think your policies too, your housing policies, if you really have to have good, strong housing policies. I think that's another thing that we are really working towards, whether it be you know, nobody has a perfect policy, but I mean, if it suits you, as long as it suits your community, that's it's important. So I know, I guess the question that I got is how many, like, I don't know if you have a community members committee in your community, but I know we have one, and it's not a big committee, but I mean, it's like, how big is, you know, I mean, how much is important? Like, how much do you need, like, to have a good committee? And I look forward to the rest of the week. So, thanks.
I don't believe there is a magic number. How many? I've seen committees 4 or 5. I've seen more. My home community, our committee structure not only for housing but for every committee, we target 5. Try to get a cross section of the youth and elder, women and men. There's a selection process that happens with during our elections. Afterwards, the chief and council go through a selection. We try to get continuity as best we can. Housing committee is so important. It's a conduit between the members, chief and council, and the administration. They provide support to the administration in helping you carry on your challenging duties. There's decisions that are going to have to be made, for maybe new housing construction, allocation of those new units. You want it as fair as possible, so the committee plays a key role. Policy development, develop the best policy you can, and then constantly challenge the committee to improve upon it. There should be an annual review and approval. Things change, you learn more. So it's huge, the work of the committee and the policy development. And my advice is, or my comment is, there's no magic number. Whatever works for the community. Get a cross section of community members who are interested, who can help drive the process, and support them. Chief and council has to support its committees to get direction and advice from them. Similarly, the community members have to understand what the community's roles and responsibilities. If you're in need of a new house and you get denied this year, you're going to be upset, but the community has to be supported by the community, or else committee members are not going to be motivated. So it's a challenge, and just keep at it. That's all I can say. One more question? Sir, right here.
I just wanted to ask if you access any CFS dollars for construction of homes in your community.
Our housing department doesn't leave any stone unturned. They go after everything that's available. Every project, everything that needs to be done, they do what needed to try to find the money. I don't know the specifics on where things have been targeted over the last couple of years. My associate Linda, she's the right one to answer that question. My email we'll have here. If you're going to send me that specific question, I'm sure we'll answer it. But every dollar is gone after, and our housing staff have been pretty successful at putting different projects together, finding money and finding ways to do it, and they've been good at it. Linda's been really good at it. Our housing staff has been, I mentioned we had a few key staff. A couple of weeks ago, our housing construction supervisor, he retired after 40 years of work, and he built all of our crews to construct, and we're sad to see him go. But last fall, and then after Christmas, we lost 2 of our other key members. They passed away, and I just want to recognize them and their contributions to housing. I don't know, Severia, if you ever met Jeff Toulouse, and he was our housing director for the last 20 plus years. He passed away with a heart attack before Christmas, and his main administrative lead, Linda, she fell ill after Christmas. So My associate Linda, who's been retired from housing now, because we have a mandatory retirement age in our community, she just hit 65 last year, so she hasn't been able to work, but they brought her back under contract to help rebuild the housing program. So any questions you have like that on funding opportunities, get in touch with me. We'll get those answers directly. Okay. Thank you for your time. Oh, one more question back there.
Bonjour, Lillian Dedishnikas, Bingwingnia, Shianishnabik, Councillor for Sandpoint First Nation. We are very fortunate to finally build 2 homes, while there are 2 semis on our community. We were driven out of our community back in the 50s, and now we got our land back, 2010, and we've built 2 homes, so we're really fortunate for that. Our driving force was our elders, and I know we have a lot to look forward to as how we're gonna, I worry about how if they don't pay, if they can't afford to pay the upkeep, or how the rent's gonna be. But with the funding, have you, is there or can you access Jordan's principle for housing? Yeah, because right now we've geared the homes for wheelchair access. But I know we also have youth and the younger families that want to move back home too.
That's an excellent question. I don't have that specific answer for you. Severio, have you heard anything about that? We'll find your answer. You know Scott Flumon? Yeah. Scott and I are good buddies. Him and I will work and get the answer for you.
Any last questions? No? Okay. Thank you, Walter, on behalf of the working group for your presentation today.
We got you, everyone.